She stepped out of the international terminal at Incheon Airport, the crisp November air kissing her cheeks and carrying the faint, comforting scent of roasted sweet potatoes from a street vendor nearby. Her name was Adaora, though everyone back home in Enugu called her Ada. She was 31 years old, a master architect specializing in acoustic restoration, and she carried in her brown leather satchel a singular dream: to prove that ancient wooden structures had a voice that modern concrete could never replicate. She had spent 3 years securing a prestigious fellowship with the Seoul Cultural Heritage Institute. To the rest of the board in Nigeria, it was a career milestone. To Adaora, it was a quiet sanctuary, a place to lose herself in blue-ink blueprints, seasoned timber, and the precise geometry of acoustic spaces after a painful breakup had left her heart guarded behind thick, invisible walls. She adjusted the collar of her wool coat and boarded the express train into the heart of Seoul. As the city unfolded outside her window, a breathtaking mosaic of gleaming glass skyscrapers framed against the dark, ancient silhouettes of the Namsan Mountains. She had no idea that her life was about to intersect with a man whose soul was just as guarded, and whose heart was searching for the exact same frequency. If you are listening to this story right now and you love deep, authentic, emotional love stories that span across cultures, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to drop a comment below letting us know where in the world you are listening from today. Now, let us step into the cold, beautiful autumn afternoon where Adaora's journey truly began. The Namsan Acoustic Pavilion was over a century old. Tucked into a quiet, pine-forested ridge overlooking the bustling metropolis below, it was once the private performance chamber for Korea's royal court musicians. Time, moisture, and decades of neglect had dampened its once legendary acoustics. The city had slated it for eventual demolition to make way for a multi-million-dollar luxury resort development, unless the restoration team could prove its irreplaceable cultural and acoustic value within 90 days. When Adaora stepped into the pavilion for the first time, her boots echoed against the weathered pine floorboards. She reached out, placing her bare palm against a massive, dark pillar made of ancient Korean red pine. She closed her eyes, sensing the subtle vibrations of the wind passing through the joinery. You shouldn't touch the timber without gloves. The oils on human skin attract moisture. The voice was quiet, deep, and measured. It came in flawless, elegant English with a soft Korean cadence. Adaora opened her eyes and turned. Standing near the back of the hollow stage was a tall man in a tailored dark gray coat, his dark hair falling slightly over a sharp, thoughtful forehead. He carried a digital sound frequency monitor in one hand and a set of old brass measuring tools in the other. "This is red pine treated with traditional pine wood resin 80 years ago," Adaora said softly, her voice calm and grounded. "Human skin oils won't penetrate that cure. But the microfractures along the upper joint near the roof beam are leaking acoustic pressure. That's why your frequency monitor is dropping 2 decibels in the mid-range." The man paused. He raised his eyes from his monitor, looking at her properly for the very first time. His name was Jiho. Jiho was 34, the chief acoustic designer for the prestigious Yoon Heritage Restoration Group. To his colleagues and family, Jiho was known as a man of absolute precision and unyielding quietness. He spoke only when necessary, rarely smiled, and kept the world at a disciplined distance. His father, the legendary founder of the company, had passed away 3 years prior, leaving Jiho carrying the crushing weight of a family legacy under the watchful, demanding eye of his traditional mother and corporate uncle. For 3 weeks, Jiho had worked with 3 different international sound engineers on the pavilion, and not one of them had noticed the microfractures near the roof beam without reading a computer diagnostic first. "You must be Architect Egwu from the fellowship," Jiho said, stepping forward and offering a polite, precise bow. "I am Yoon Jiho." "It's a pleasure, Mr. Yoon," Adaora replied, bowing back with natural grace. "But please call me Ada." Take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss beautiful stories that bring you the Afro-Korean love journey. And so their work began. Working inside an unheated wooden pavilion in the dead of a Seoul autumn was not for the faint of heart. Day after day, as the pine trees outside turned brilliant shades of amber and crimson, Adaora and Ji-ho worked side by side. At first, their interaction was purely professional, strictly defined by blueprint measurements, decibel readouts, and timbre treatment formulas. Yet, beneath the formal silence, a quiet harmony began to form. Ji-ho observed the way Adaora worked. She was unlike any architect he had ever met. She didn't just calculate structure. She felt it. She would stand in the center of the empty hall, clap her hands once, and listen to the decay of the echo with an intensity that fascinated him. When she found a stubborn problem in the timber joinery, she wouldn't throw her hands up in frustration. She would brew a steaming cup of Nigerian ginger tea from a flask she carried, sit on the steps of the stage, and sketch alternative joinery methods by hand. One late afternoon, as a sudden rainstorm battered the paper screen windows of the pavilion, the temperature inside dropped sharply. Adaora was standing on a low wooden scaffold, attempting to measure the upper acoustic baffle, when her fingers, stiff from the chill, slipped on the brass ruler. Ji-ho moved before he even consciously thought about it. He stepped onto the low platform and caught her elbow gently, steadying her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it before. "I'm fine," Adaora said, turning her face toward his. They were standing barely a foot apart. In the dim, amber light of the storm, Ji-ho looked into her warm brown eyes, seeing the quiet resilience, the sharp intellect, and the gentle grace that he had spent weeks secretly admiring. For the first time in 3 years, the tight, heavy knot in Ji-ho's chest loosened. "You're freezing?" Ji-ho whispered, gently taking the cold brass ruler from her stiff fingers. "Work is over for today." He led her down from the scaffold and picked up his coat. Instead of heading straight to their separate cars, Ji-ho took a breath, looked at the floor for a second, and then looked back up at her. "There is a small traditional tea house down the mountain road. They serve warm jujube tea and barley soup. Would you join me?" Adaora looked at his earnest, quiet face and felt a warm flicker ignite in her heart. "I would love that, Ji-ho." If you are loving the quiet romance building between Adaora and Ji-ho, take a second to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss how their story unfolds. And leave a comment below telling us what your favorite K-drama or romance trope is. Now, let us follow them down the quiet mountain road. The tea house was built in the traditional style, with warm wooden floors heated from below and paper lanterns casting a gentle glow. As they sat across from each other at a low wooden table, steam rising from their cups, the walls of formality began to dissolve. Ji-ho learned about Adaora's life in Enugu, about her mother's sprawling garden, the vibrant colors of the local markets, her late father who had taught her to listen to the wind through the mahogany trees, and the rich cultural heritage that shaped her view of architecture. "When you build or restore a space in my culture," Adaora explained, smiling as she held her teacup in both hands, "you aren't just putting together wood and nails. You are building a home for memories. If a room doesn't feel welcoming when it's empty, it will never feel right when it's full." Ji-ho listened, completely captivated. For years, architecture had been presented to him by his family as a cold business of stock values, preservation grants, and corporate prestige. Adaora was breathing life, warmth, and music back into his world. "And what about you, Ji-ho?" she asked softly, noticing the quiet shadow that passed over his face whenever his family business was mentioned. "Why did you choose acoustic restoration?" Ji-ho looked down at his tea, tracing the rim of the ceramic cup with his index finger. "When I was 9 years old, my father took me to an old wooden hall in Gyeongju," he said quietly. "He told me that wood never truly dies. Even after it is cut and shaped into a pillar, it responds to heat, to moisture, and to human sound. It remembers every song sung inside it. I wanted to be the person who helps old wood keep its memory alive. But as the company grew, my family forgot about the memory. They only saw the numbers." He raised his eyes, looking directly into hers. "Until you walked into the pavilion 3 weeks ago, I thought I had forgotten how to listen, too." A deep, electric silence settled between them, Not the awkward silence of strangers, but the tender, sacred silence of two souls recognizing each other in a crowded world. Over the next 4 weeks, their bond deepened into something profound and undeniable. They began spending their lunch breaks sharing meals, Adaora introducing Ji-ho to rich African spices, and Ji-ho showing her the quiet, hidden alleyways of Old Seoul. When they worked together late into the night at the pavilion, their movements were so synchronized they barely needed words. A simple glance from Adaora, and Ji-ho was already handing her the exact tool she needed. A quiet sign of fatigue from him, and she was pouring him a warm cup of tea. They were falling in love, deeply, steadily, and completely. However, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. The Yoon family conglomerate was facing a major financial restructuring. Ji-ho's uncle, Director Yoon, and his formidable mother had secretly negotiated a deal with a major Korean real estate developer. The plan was to let the 90-day restoration period fail, declare the Namsan Pavilion acoustically unsalvageable, and clear the land for the luxury resort. In exchange, the developer would inject tens of millions of dollars into the Yoon family firm. To solidify the deal, Ji-ho's mother had arranged for him to be engaged to the daughter of the real estate chairman. A cold, transactional alliance that would secure the family's wealth for another generation. When Ji-ho discovered the secret plot, he confronted his mother and uncle at the family estate. "The pavilion is an irreplaceable treasure," Ji-ho declared, his voice trembling with rare anger as he stood in the grand family dining room. "The acoustic structure is unique in all of East Asia. We are 90% done with the restoration. You are being sentimental, Ji-ho," his mother snapped, setting her teacup down with a sharp clatter. "The company is in debt. This fellowship project brings us no profit. You will sign the release papers declaring the pavilion unsalvageable, and you will meet Chairman Park's daughter for dinner this Friday." "I will not lie about the work," Ji-ho said firmly, "and I will not marry a woman I do not love." Director Yoon stood up, his face cold and commanding. "You will do as your family requires, Ji-ho. If you refuse, we will terminate the fellowship contract with the African architect tomorrow morning. She will be removed from the project, her visa recommendation revoked, and she will be sent back to Nigeria in disgrace for failure to meet corporate standards." Ji-ho felt the air leave his chest. His family knew that Adaora was his weakness. They were using her career and her reputation to force his hand. That night, Ji-ho returned to the dark, empty pavilion. He sat on the edge of the stage, his head buried in his hands, torn between the duty he had carried his whole life and the woman who had given him a reason to live. He didn't hear Adaora's quiet footsteps as she walked up behind him. She had come back to leave a set of finalized acoustic charts. She saw him sitting alone in the dark, his shoulders shaking slightly. Adaora knelt beside him on the floorboard, gently placing her hand over his trembling fingers. "Ji-ho, what happened?" she asked softly. Ji-ho looked up, tears glistening in his eyes. He couldn't hide it any longer. He told her everything: the corporate deal, the threat to destroy the pavilion, the arranged marriage, and the threat to ruin her career and send her home. "I won't let them hurt you, Adaora," Ji-ho whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I will resign from the company. I will let them take my title, my position, everything, as long as your name remains untarnished." Adaora looked at the man who was willing to sacrifice his entire inheritance and reputation to protect her. A tear slipped down her cheek, but her expression did not show defeat. It showed the unshakable strength of a woman who loved fiercely. She took his face in both of her warm hands, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me, Yoon Ji-ho," Adaora said, her voice filled with steel and quiet devotion. "You are not going to resign, and we are not going to let them destroy this hall or our work. You taught me that wood remembers every sound. Well, this pavilion remembers our sweat, our dedication, and our love. We are going to fight for it together." Ji-ho stared at her, feeling a surge of courage he had never known in his entire life. He reached up, covering her hands with his own, and kissed her. A deep, desperate, beautiful kiss that carried all the unspoken devotion, passion, and promises of their souls. If you are standing with Adaora and Jiho right now, hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and tell us in the comments. Would you stay and fight alongside the person you love, or would you walk away? Let us know your thoughts. The day of the final Cultural Heritage Preservation Board evaluation arrived. The Grand Conference Hall at the Ministry of Culture was packed with international architects, city council members, press reporters, Director Yoon, Jiho's mother, and the executives of the real estate empire. Director Yoon stepped up to the podium first, sliding a thick, falsified report onto the projection screen. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss beautiful stories that bring you the Afro-Korean love journey. Ladies and gentlemen, Director Yoon announced smoothly, despite our firm's best efforts, the structural decay of the Namsan Pavilion's timber is too advanced. The internal resonance is dead. It is our professional recommendation that the land be cleared for modern development. A quiet murmur of disappointment swept through the room. If I may, Chairman, a clear, confident voice echoed from the back of the hall. Every head turned. Adaora walked down the center aisle, dressed in a stunning, regal-tailored dark suit accented with vibrant gold Igbo hand-woven silk across the shoulder. Beside her, carrying a heavy brass acoustic resonance chamber and a stack of newly printed sonic blueprints, was Jiho. Jiho walked straight past his thunderstruck uncle and his furious mother, standing tall right beside Adaora at the main presenter's table. Architect Egwu and I have completed the final acoustic evaluation, Jiho announced, his voice projecting across the room with undeniable authority. And my uncle's report is entirely false. Gasps filled the room. Flashbulbs began to explode as journalists leaned forward. Director Yoon's face turned bright red. Jiho, what is the meaning of this insolence? Security, let them speak, the chairman of the Cultural Heritage Board commanded, raising his hand. Adaora stepped forward to the microphone. Her voice was calm, clear, and utterly mesmerizing. 100 years ago, Adaora explained, projecting a brilliant 3D digital scan onto the main screen, the original master builders of the Namsan Pavilion created a hidden, double-chambered acoustic resonator inside the roof joinery, a design technique long thought lost to history. They didn't use nails or metal glue. They used interlocking pine joints that required precise humidity to activate their full sound projection. She turned to Jiho, who connected a digital sound amplifier to the brass acoustic model they had brought from the pavilion. Yesterday morning, Adaora continued, looking directly at Jiho with a soft, radiant smile. We completed the traditional oil treatment on the upper joinery. Allow us to demonstrate the true voice of the Namsan Pavilion. Jiho struck a small, traditional bronze tuning fork and touched it to the wooden model. Immediately, a rich, crystal-clear, breathtaking sound wave echoed through the massive conference hall. The sound was so warm, so pure, and so resonant that it seemed to vibrate directly in the chests of everyone present. It didn't sound like old wood. It sounded like a living, breathing orchestra. The entire international board sat in stunned silence for 3 full seconds. Then, the chairman of the Heritage Board stood up and began to clap. Within moments, the entire hall erupted into thunderous applause. The media rushed forward, cameras flashing endlessly. The Namsan Pavilion was officially designated a permanent national cultural monument, saving it forever from demolition. Director Yoon and the real estate executives hurried out of the hall in disgrace, their fraudulent scheme completely exposed to the press. In the hallway outside, Jiho's mother stood waiting. She looked at her son, then at Adaora. The arrogance in her eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet, reluctant realization that her son was no longer a boy to be controlled. Jiho walked up to his mother, standing hand in hand with Adaora. I am stepping down from the corporate board, mother, Jiho said peacefully. I am establishing an independent architectural preservation firm with Adaora. You can keep the corporate stocks. I am keeping my integrity, my passion, and the woman I love. His mother looked at their joined hands, saw the absolute, unshakable devotion in her son's eyes, and slowly bowed her head, walking away in silent acceptance. 1 year later, the The Namsan Acoustic Pavilion was officially reopened to the public with a grand international concert. Musicians from around the world gathered to perform inside the perfectly restored wooden hall. As the beautiful melodies of traditional Korean flutes and West African kora strings blended together, filling the warm, resonant timber space with music, Jiho and Adaora stood on the quiet balcony overlooking the glowing lights of Seoul. Adaora wore a breathtaking silk gown, her hand resting warmly inside Jiho's. On her ring finger was a custom ring carved from polished Korean red pine, inlaid with a delicate band of Nigerian gold. Jiho turned to her, pulling her close into his arms, resting his forehead against hers. "Do you remember what you told me on our first week here?" Jiho whispered, his warm breath brushing her lips. "That when you restore a space, you are building a home for memories." Adaora smiled, her eyes shining with tears of pure happiness. "I remember." Jiho kissed her gently, holding her as if she were the most precious treasure in the universe. "Then this hall will sing our story forever," Jiho promised, "because every sound inside it began the day you walked into my life." Under the starlit Seoul sky, surrounded by the warm music of two worlds united in perfect harmony, Adaora and Jiho knew that their love was not a fleeting dream. It was a home built to last a lifetime. Thank you so much for listening to this beautiful love story on our channel today. If Adaora and Jiho's journey touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Drop a comment below and tell us what you loved most about their romance. Stay blessed, stay strong, and we will see you in our next video.